Blessed is the name of the Lord.
Thank you. Mark chapter 12, verses 41 through 44. And he, Jesus, sat down opposite the treasury and watched the people putting money into the offering box. Many rich people put in large sums. And a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which make a penny. Of course, that's English translation there. And he called his disciples to him and said to them, Truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the offering box. For they all contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty has put in everything she has. Now here's an interesting phrase. All she had to live on. Excuse me. Jesus' final act in the temple is not a miracle, it's not a debate, it's not a confrontation, it's a moment of watching, or at least observing. He has just warned the crowd to beware of the scribes who, he said, devoured widows' houses. And now he sits down opposite the treasury and watches people give. The treasury at the temple had 13 trumpet-shaped chests. Do you know what we mean by trumpet-shaped? Wealthy donors made loud, clanging contributions. They didn't have paper money back in those days. They had coins, and they'd throw the coins into those. And if you ever been around like the coin changing deals, or even sometimes they'll have in stores or amusement parks, you put your coin on and go around and around and around, and you can imagine the noise that would make. And if you threw in a bunch of coins, it'd just clang and clang and clang. But here's this widow, she comes by and she puts in 2 little copper coins. So the rich came with clanging coins and polished reputations. The widow approaches, quiet, really unnoticed, unimportant to the system, drops in those 2 tiny copper coins, hardly a noise. But see, that's not the end of it. She's come to the temple to not just give 2 little copper coins. She's come to surrender herself. And sometimes we miss that. She's come to live there, to work there, to totally depend on the mercy of God for her survival. We read in the Bible of women like Anna. Remember Anna, Luke chapter 2? And other women are mentioned in the scriptures who lived even way back at the tabernacle or at the temple. And here they are. They've got nowhere else to go. They've got no means of survival, so they live at the temple and they serve so they can have food to eat and a place to lay their heads. And maybe some clothing that people donate. That's what she's come to do. And Jesus rises to speak. His last word in the temple before he announces its destruction comes. His final word is about this widow. Why is that? Well, why would that be the last thing that Jesus is going to talk about in the temple? Because this widow reveals everything the temple was supposed to be and everything that it had become. And that's what our lesson is about today. the law's heart and the temple's failure. The law of Moses repeatedly commands Israel to take care of widows. Widows and orphans, right? Those who are poor, those who can't help themselves. That's what they were supposed to do. Widows were to be protected, honored, and supported. God himself is described as the defender of widows. But Jesus has just said something devastating. The scribes devour widows' houses, and we talked about that week before last, right? They had a fiduciary responsibility. They were supposed to take the funds that the widows had to see that they were taken care of, but they used it for themselves. The very leaders entrusted with the law twisted it, bent it out of shape. The very institution meant to shelter widows had become a place where widows were drained of their resources. Into that setting walks a widow who still believes God is worthy of her devotion. The widow still comes to worship. How many widows just give up on religion? Nobody's there to help. Nobody's doing what they're supposed to do. The temple isn't helping, and in our days vernacular, the church isn't helping me. She's not defined by the failures of the system, though. She comes to worship. Her devotion is anchored in God, not in the religious institution that's failed her. She's going to trust in God. Her presence exposes a gap between God's law and human religion. What God intended and what had become in the scribes and the Pharisees and the chief priests and all who would look at her and say, she can't do us any good, so we don't want her around. And the law that said, she's precious. She's a precious soul. She embodies what the law intended. Her faithfulness stands where leadership is collapsed. She gives because her faith is not anchored in the temple. It's anchored in God. She trusts that God is going to work it out for her. So the widow's offering, it's not those 2 little copper coins. It's a life that's surrendered to God. She gives all she had to live on. That's that phrase. Remember, I told you, pay attention to that. All she had to live on. The Greek phrase there suggests she gives her whole life. Remember what Jesus talked about with the lawyer way back a little bit before? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. That's what she's doing. That's what she's doing. That's not what the scribes are doing. That's not what the Pharisees are doing. It's not even what the chief priests are doing. That's what she's doing. So this passage is not solely about money. It may not be about money at all. Her offering is not a financial transaction. It's a spiritual declaration that says, my life belongs to God. And when a life fully belongs to God, to the Lord, money issues are solved. Money issues fall into place. So the widow's sacrifice reflects the call Jesus gives to every disciple. It reflects the call that he gives to each and every one of us. He doesn't need our money. No. Thank you. He expects us to give. To give and to give according to our means, and to give in a way that would be pleasing to God. But discipleship is not measured by what the scribes and the Pharisees were proposing. Public visibility, religious status, or outward success. It's measured by the willingness to give oneself fully to God. To give oneself fully to God. She doesn't hold back. She doesn't stand there and negotiate. God, if I give you my last 2 cents, we'll use those words, what will you do for me? Her devotion's not hidden. She doesn't calculate. She just gives herself. Discipleship often happens in quiet, unseen acts. And that's what's going on with her. Her sacrifice is quiet. Her devotion is hidden. Her faith is simple. But it's total. It's the essence of discipleship. What did Jesus say? Take up your cross. Lose your life for my sake if you want to gain it. Follow me. She's living the call before the disciples fully understand what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. The kingdom will carry forward what the temple abandoned. And that's an important lesson for us, and what we were talking about in Bible class about the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount is about what Judaism should have been, and what it failed to be, but what the kingdom must be. Immediately after this moment, Jesus leaves the temple and declares that it will fall. We'll talk about that next week, Lord willing. If I can get over this cough and carrying on. The building that failed widows will crumble. The leadership that exploited the vulnerable will be swept away, but the widow's devotion will not be lost. We're talking about it today, aren't we? Her faith becomes a template for kingdom discipleship. This is what we need to do. Give first ourselves to Christ, and everything will fall into place. Her surrender becomes a pattern for church's life. Her trust becomes a model for the new community God will build. We can't build a church on the old material. We have to become a new creation for the church to be what is pleasing to God. And when the church is born, when it comes into existence, day of Pentecost, the church remembers her. In Acts chapter 6, when widows are neglected, what happens? The apostles remember the teaching of Jesus. What do? They intervene. Hey, we're going to take care of this problem. This isn't right that widows are being neglected. In 1 Timothy chapter 5, widows are given a place of honor in ministry. Hey, now there are limits. There are constraints. She's going to be 60 years old, a wife of one husband, no children, things of that nature. But widows to be taken care of. They're to be taken care of. And if they can work, they're supposed to work. They're supposed to help. In James chapter 1, verse 27, caring for widows is part of the definition of true religion, along with what? Caring for orphans. You see what the temple abandoned in doing what the law said to do, the church is supposed to fulfill it. The new covenant fulfills it. This widow's offering becomes a quiet prophecy of what the kingdom will be. A community where sacrifice is honored. Listen, we talked about the disciples going through the fields, and because they were hungry, they took some grain heads and rub them to get rid of the chaff so that it have just the, and the Pharisees said, hey, they can't do that. And the Pharisees want to, no, you have to sacrifice. Sacrifice is something that is our choice. We choose to sacrifice. We don't have to. We don't have to make a sacrifice. We don't have to give sacrificially. We don't have to act sacrificially. But here's the problem. If we don't, we fail to meet God's standard. That's where the problem lies. The church is a community where sacrifice is honored. Where somebody who doesn't have to do something says, I'm going to give up some time. I'm going to give up some money. I'm going to give up some resources. I'm going to do this for the kingdom's sake. Devotion is seen here. And where discipleship is lived out in everyday faithfulness. Just a sincere trust in God. Her offering points to Christ's own, and that's another layer that's added on to this whole deal. Jesus says she gave her whole life. You know what? He's about to give his life. Her act of surrender foreshadows his act of redemption. She places her life in God's hands as a living sacrifice. He places his life on the cross, putting himself in his Father's hands in hope of the resurrection. That's a foreshadowing. That's like a picture of what was coming. But her trust is a foreshadow of his trust, which should be what? Foreshadowing of our trust in God. Are you ready? Conclusion. But there are about 3 parts in it. So don't get too comfortable. The widow's 2 coins is not a lesson about money, it's a lesson about discipleship. She shows what it means to trust God with everything. Not a part of our lives. Not what little bit we want to give up. Brothers and sisters, everything has to be put into the hands of God. She shows us what it means to trust God with everything. She shows us what it means to live with open hands, dependence on God. She shows us what it means to give our lives to the one who gave his life for us. Her offering is not loud. It's not impressive. It's not noticed by the world. Jesus sees it. Jesus honors it. Jesus lifts it up as a Bible picture of true devotion before he goes to the cross. There it is. That's why we remember it. We wouldn't know a thing about it if Jesus hadn't pointed it out. Now the church, the new temple, the kingdom community, is called to live by the same Spirit. A life surrendered to God, a life devoted to God, a life given to God. Not because we have to, because we want to. Because we need that dependence upon Him. It's not a part of the life, not the safe parts, not the leftovers. God will give you what's left over. No. All of it. Right up at the beginning. Just like the widow. But more importantly, just like the Savior that she foreshadows. That's our lesson. It's not about money. choose to live as disciples of Jesus Christ. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Listen, if you have a need, please let your request be made known. So stand and sing.